very difficult to detect them. It is very valuable to a foreign agent to be inside there. As a foreign intelligence company, you're most likely not doing your job.
Senator, what are the chances right now that China is operating in some capacity within these social media companies, including Twitter?
Very high. I mean, it sounds like almost 100% based on what the whistleblower testified to. And, listen, I mean, there's a reason that they want to get access. It's because the data is so easy. It is so easy to get Americans' personal information. But here's the other thing I'm worried about, Laura. Our own government wants to control these companies, and they don't even have to ask very, very hard. The companies are willing to turn over the keys of the kingdom to the Biden administration. Who was first on the list for the Biden administration to go to talk about censorship with their unconstitutional disinformation board? Twitter. First on the list. Who are we going to go meet with? Twitter. We also know that Facebook now sat down with the Biden administration and actually took down accounts based on what Biden's team was telling them to do. Can we take this account down? And Facebook says, oh, yes, we can. We have the emails for it. So these are censorship machines, and they're being manipulated every which way, including, unfortunately, by this administration.
Yeah, well, they're proxy censors for the government, which is why when you all get power back, and we hope that's very soon, rather than all of us, putting out our hot air on this, actually something has to be done, Senator. And that's what I think that people are expecting when you all take power. I know you agree with that. Speaking of something you just said, and this is kind of related, TikTok's COO, Vanessa Pappas, also testified on the Hill this week and made an admission about some of the employees' locations. Watch this.
We do have employees based in China. We also have very strict access controls around the type of data that they can access and where that data is stored, which is here in the United States. And we've also said under no circumstances would we give that data to China. Our final agreement with the U.S. government will satisfy all national security concerns.
Senator, a lot of people's breath is just taken away by that admission. So we're supposed to feel good about this because they were all going to be separate, right? TikTok, separate ownership. We don't have to worry about China. Mike Pompeo disagrees.
Listen, I totally disagree. Here's the truth of the matter. TikTok has Chinese employees who have access to U.S. user data, and they're doing nothing to stop it. And by the way, they employ members of the Chinese Communist Party who have access to user data, which that same witness testified under oath to earlier this week. So the bottom line here is whether we're talking about TikTok or Twitter or Facebook, you can be sure that if you're on those services, your information is probably getting reviewed by some foreign government and is also probably getting reviewed by this government, by the U.S. government. And whenever the Biden administration wants them to censor, they're going to. Whenever China wants to get a hold of your data, they can.
Senator, thank you for staying on this and for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.
I'm joined now by former federal prosecutor Joyce Vance and David Priest, a former CIA officer who's briefed presidents and is the author of the President's Book of Secrets. Joyce, I begin with you, and I emphasize that there can be very controversial or problematically rendered rulings. They are law. Everyone, including the Justice Department and the prosecutors, the FBI, they have to follow it. And so I'm curious what you think happens practically in this case right now, as well as the criticism that, well, it seems like this judge is really going out of their way.
So it's not infrequent that litigants on one side of a case are disappointed in a federal judge's ruling. I think the disappointment here, frankly, is much more broadly based and goes to concerns about whether the ruling has any legal merit whatsoever. But that said, Ari, I think you make an important point that in a rule of law country, we're obligated to follow these rulings from federal judges. And if a party does not like them, then they have the option of going back to the judge to ask for a different ruling, which DOJ did here with its motion for a stay, and which the judge rejected. And now DOJ can go to Atlanta and ask for a ruling. There's been a lot of criticism about that court as being composed of six of the judges on that court, which has 12 seats. One is currently open, so there are only 11 judges, but 6 of them were appointed by Trump. But, you know, every federal judge has to be appointed by one president or another. And while this has been characterized as a conservative court, it is perhaps conservative in the sense that it has often spoken in favor of the rule of law. So what we'll find out now is whether the 11th Circuit will continue to honor its proud tradition and join the judges, many of them Trump appointed, who after 2020 resoundingly said that there was not fraud involved in the election and ruled against the former president because it was the right thing to do on the facts and the law.
Yeah, understood. And David, as we learn more about why Donald Trump kept these materials at the Florida compound and who lied about them, it definitely looks worse. I've told viewers, of all the assorted cases that involve Donald Trump, I do not believe, based on the current evidence, this is the one that's most likely to involve, for example, his personal indictment. And there are a lot of reasons for that, including the layers of people around him. That doesn't mean no one would ever be indicted. It doesn't mean that people misfired if they thought they could just lie to the government or prosecutors and get away with it. So given your expertise on intel, let's read a little more from the piece I mentioned in the Post that the White House counsel said he did talk to Meadows, the former chief of staff, who made the assertion, because they knew there were dozens of boxes. So you can't just say there's nothing there. And he said, quote, the people familiar with the call say that he basically said these clippings were not intelligence. Trump's team was aware of no other materials, the lawyer says, relaying information he got from Meadows. So what does it mean to you to claim that it's all news clippings? Does it sound like something that Mr. Meadows could have been completely confused about, or does it sound like a cover-up that could turn into a crime?
Well, you've got to have the investigation to examine a couple of different steps there. First, you've got to have the step of who told Mark Meadows that, or how did Mark Meadows get that impression? Was it directly from the president, or was it his own belief because he had some access to these documents? So that's number one. Then another one. You look at Pat Philbin and Mark Meadows and the chain there. Philbin says that Mark Meadows told him this. What actually happened there? And the problem is right now, the government, following the order from Judge Cannon, they're not doing a full investigation. Sure, the judge said they could go ahead and do some steps of the investigation, but they couldn't use the content of these documents to do it. Well, that's awfully awkward. That's like interviewing a witness and saying, when did you see that document? And they say, what document? And then you have to stop because you can't describe the document except, oh, it's one of those with a top secret cover sheet, or it's another one. You can't point out what the actual title of the classified document was because the judge is prohibiting the government from doing that right now.
And that brings us full circle back to Joyce. I got to say, maybe the beat bookers picked the right guess because we have both lanes covered. When you get back to the legal part, Joyce, does it really make sense for a judge to be micromanaging an open probe of this nature? If you weren't a lawyer, you'd wonder why the person who had their home searched for stolen materials that aren't theirs is now getting this deference as compared to the prosecutors who are dealing with the contraband. I mean, now they have a limit on using stuff that, best we know, and I will always update on our broadcast if we learn something different, best we know, ain't the search subject's property to begin with.
This is a very unusual form of interference by a district judge into the government's ability to investigate a case. DOJ executed, as you and I discussed ad nauseum, Ari, a search warrant that was issued by a federal judge who found that there was probable cause for the government to proceed. And DOJ was very clearly entitled to the stay that it asked the judge to issue in this case, because really the fight is not about everything that the government found during this lawful search, although it could have been and may well end up being in Atlanta. It's just about documents that bear classified markings, documents that are presumptively classified. And yet this judge has bent over backwards to credit an argument that even Trump's lawyers failed to make. Because while in the course of briefing here, they argued that Trump had the authority while he was president to declassify documents, they never said that he had done that. And one suspects that they didn't go that far because they were filing papers with the court and they had an obligation to be truthful. And so they stopped short of telling a lie. Now we have a federal judge, though, who seems to be insinuating that there's a possibility that the former president did declassify the documents. That's really the only basis that would support her ruling. She is so far out ahead of where the evidence is in this case that it is simply an unmerited interference in the criminal justice system. It does not serve Americans. It does not serve the rule of law. Hopefully the judges in Atlanta will have an opportunity to remedy that wrong.
And to what Joyce is referencing, David, I'll read that part of the ruling. The judge refers to the premise that these documents are classified government records and then says the judges refer to themselves as the court. So she says, the court doesn't find it appropriate to accept the government conclusions on these disputed issues without third-party review. Again, the review will take time, but sooner or later it'll end. But, David, the review here would be what? That not only the special master makes sure there were no errors, like, a wrong piece of paper got in a pile, but that what? There's some secret forgery that it says classified on there, but it's not classified? I mean, in what world would these classified documents that have gone through the process, that a magistrate oversaw, that the Justice Department decided to search at the highest levels of Merrick Garland, would then turn out to be not classified at all?
The only scenarios I can think of where that could happen is if the special master found out that the FBI investigators had been either completely incompetent or completely evil, or both. Because the only reasonable scenario of looking at a classified document that has classification markings on it is that somehow in this mess of papers and other materials that the former president had stored in each box, that some other piece of paper slipped in, maybe got half stuck under a staple, and that page wasn't classified. But then that assumes that the investigators, in flipping through these documents, and we know they did so because we have reporting that some of them had to get additional clearances in order to look at some of these documents, that they didn't notice that there was a personal note or a sock or a hamburger wrapper, whatever it was, stuck in this classified document, and they're pretending that that's classified. Short of that, it's pretty easy for this special master, who has years of experience on the FISA court, who has been around classified material a lot. It's going to be a pretty quick operation for him to look at these classified documents, flip through them, and determine, yeah, they're no kidding classified. There's nothing in here that was obviously misclassified or something that the government is representing as classified that is not marked as such. That part should be relatively quick and easy if it gets to that point.
Gotcha. Really interesting stuff, David and Joyce. Thanks to both of you.
Begin with the news on the new findings from the State Department showing Russia has secretly funneled more than $300 million to foreign political parties since 2014 in an effort to influence elections in more than 24 countries. A State Department summary of a recent U.S. intelligence review shows the money was often covertly sent to politicians and parties through think tanks, fake contracts, state-owned enterprises, and shell companies. And, according to the New York Times, Russia has probably given even more that has gone undetected, the document said. The Times reports the State Department document was sent as a cable to American embassies around the world and amounts, quote, to an initial effort by the Biden administration to use intelligence material to expose the scope of Russian interference in global political processes and elections and rally other nations to help combat it. You'll recall that back in 2020, intelligence agencies determined that Russia interfered in the 2016 presidential election in favor of Donald Trump. A nearly 1,000-page report from the Republican-led Senate Intelligence Committee on the Russia investigation detailed how Russia launched an aggressive effort to interfere in the election on Donald Trump's behalf. It detailed the close relationship between former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort and Konstantin Kilimnik, who the committee describes as a Russian intelligence officer. quote, taken as a whole, Manafort's high-level access and willingness to share information with individuals closely affiliated with the Russian intelligence services, particularly Kilimnik, represented a grave counterintelligence threat, the report says. Manafort's lawyer at the time refuted the report's findings. The panel's acting GOP chairman at the time was Senator Marco Rubio of Florida.
Let's bring in former NATO Supreme Allied Commander James Stavridis. He's MSNBC Chief International Analyst. So, you know, we always talk about the election hoaxes. We talk about the QAnon hoaxes. We talk about the COVID hoaxes. We talk about all the lies that Trump and Trump has spread around the media ecosystem. I've got to say, for me, the one that really stings is Russian hoax. When people start talking about a Russian hoax because of the lies contained in the Steele dossier, they ignore Marco Rubio's Senate Intel Committee saying that the Trump 2016 contacts with Russia constituted a grave counterintelligence threat, or that all the intel agencies were saying that Russia was getting involved to help Donald Trump win the 2016 election campaign. This morning, more evidence. $300 million spent worldwide by Vladimir Putin to try to influence campaigns, mainly in the United States, but also in some other Western democracies. A $300 million hoax. That's some hoax, Admiral. Talk about the consequences of it and the risks.
You bet. And let's all be not be naive here. We're getting the tip of the iceberg, no doubt. I mean, this is where a lot of Russian oil and gas revenue goes, is to shape the international system. And you're going to hear some people kind of quoting that great movie of global geopolitics, Casablanca, saying, oh, come on, this is business as usual around the world. You know, I can't believe there's gambling in this house. No. This is wrong. It is huge. We're just seeing the beginning of this, I think. And we ought to remember here that this not only goes right at the heart of who we are as a nation, but also, as you mentioned, our allies, partners, and friends. I would bet you everything I own that France is high on the list here, attempting to manipulate, along with other European countries. So bottom line here, U.S. intelligence is smart releasing this information. There's always that tendency, Joe, to kind of hold it back. This is a perfect example of where, by proactively launching this intelligence, we hopefully inoculate a little bit here in our own country. We alert our friends, allies, partners around the world. We encourage them to share what they are seeing. We can build that intelligence mosaic, understand this, reverse engineer it, and kill it.
A magistrate judge has unsealed previously redacted information relating to the FBI's search of former President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. The bulk of the material has to do with what has already been revealed in the ongoing battle over appointing a third party or a special master to review the information. The newly released sections of the affidavit show investigators were searching for a wide array of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago, including several types of top secret documents. It also shows that when Trump's lawyers handed over 38 documents marked top secret, secret, or confidential in June, they told investigators those documents had all been kept in a storage room at the resort. Some of the markings showed the documents contained FISA information or information that came from a confidential human source. Justice Department officials said at the time of their June 3rd visit, about 50 boxes remained in the room. According to DOJ court filings, investigators said Trump's lawyers would not let them look inside the boxes during the visit.
Let's bring in NBC News investigations correspondent Tom Winter. Tom, obviously disturbing. More information we learn, the more disturbing it is. The top secret information, the classified information that was contained in a beach club, a country club in Florida with no secure measures at all. What did we learn yesterday?
Well, not only that, but I think we're now starting to get a little bit of a clearer sense of the timeline here, Joe, as far as what was represented to the Justice Department and when by Trump's own representatives. And on top of that, we got some additional detail about the timing of the request for surveillance video from the Trump Organization and obviously from Mar-a-Lago. And I think that's an interesting development. You know, a search warrant doesn't have to contain all the steps that the FBI took and the Justice Department took in the course of putting together their investigation. They just have to prove to the judge that there's probable cause or reason enough to execute that search warrant and get those materials because there's been a violation of law. And I think one of the interesting things, just get the search warrant in front of me, is that there's a period of time between when they go to Mar-a-Lago in early June of this year and then in late June of this year where the FBI agent says the Justice Department has advised me that there are security cameras in the vicinity of this storage room in the basement of Mar-a-Lago, which we're looking at, and that they serve a subpoena on the Trump Organization for copies of that and are provided a hard drive on July 6th. So the timing there is about a week or two between when they ask for these documents through a grand jury subpoena and then, as you see on the screen, when the Trump Organization gave the FBI a hard drive. The rest of what follows that is completely redacted, really only about 9 paragraphs yesterday. We were able to see that were redacted in full or in part. But I think that that's an interesting bit of timeline. And the key question for me, looking at this, trying to figure out, okay, what happened, who was talking to who saw what, who talked to the Justice Department and told them that there was a camera or cameras there? Did they notice it when they first went to Mar-a-Lago? Did somebody tip them off that these cameras are there? And then what gave them reason to ask for those hard drives or for those items of video from the Trump property? I think is really interesting here. So that's just one of the things that I'm kind of keying in on off of yesterday's filing.
And Tom, this filing sort of lays out again how long it took to get all this stuff. It comes in drips and drabs. You get some of it in January, 15 boxes with highly classified material. That's not all of it. They go back in June, they get 50 more boxes. They say 50 boxes are remaining. Does this get at it all? Does it show you that the Justice Department might be pursuing obstruction in some way, which is to say, the National Archives asked for more than a year, and even when the FBI went in to get what they needed, they couldn't get it all because the Trump team wouldn't hand it over.
I think that was one of the key revelations from yesterday's filings, the fact that they laid out all the steps that they took. So we have some additional detail on that. I think the other thing that they put in, and I think this is noteworthy, that they were provided a certification letter, as they call it, from an unnamed individual, too, who said, based on the information that has been provided to me, this is what this individual is saying in this letter, I am authorized to certify that, one, we've searched everything. And this is all that we have. And that we searched it after a subpoena. We've made no additional documentation. And then there was also, at one point, a certification or a statement that was made that, look, the only place that these documents could be is in the storage room. And as we now know from the image that we're looking at on screen, according to the FBI, that was very much not the case, that these top secret documents that we're looking at were actually found in Trump's office. So when you start to see those statements put in to this search warrant, it's very clear that, to me, that they're starting to look at this as a potential. Who is obstructing us? Who were making what assertions to us? And, Judge, there's a reason why we need to go in. We don't think we're getting the full story here.
You know, Jonathan Lemire, a lot of questions about why. Yeah, there's still very much that we don't know. But based on the fact pattern that's out there right now in the press, the fact pattern that really all sides have admitted to, one charge, potential charge, really does seem more obvious than others even right now, and that is just flat-out obstruction of justice. Lying, claiming that you'd given back all of the top-secret documents, all the documents that Trump had stolen from the White House, a government building, and taken down to Mar-a-Lago. They just lied about it and lied to the FBI about it. Any other, again, let's just keep it to the standard of, no man is above the law. Anybody else would have been in jail for doing that. It's just that simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, legal experts have zeroed in on the obstruction possibility. Joe, you're right about that. The lawyers said everything was returned. It wasn't. Lawyers said everything was in a secure spot in the Mar-a-Lago. It wasn't. Stuff was found in Trump's desk in the 45 office. So there was all sorts of suggestions there that they simply were not truthful with investigators. And Admiral Cerritos, though, I want to get you on the other possible charge here, and that's the mishandling of this information. You spoke pretty powerfully when we had you on a couple weeks ago talking about your own experiences with classified information. And we want to know if, what sort of precedent are you concerned about here, where there is, we as much as no man is above the law, we know that. There is a sense, even from some Democrats, who worry about what it would look like if a president, a post-president, was charged with a crime for something like this. What would be the fallout? What would your concern, though, if that doesn't happen?
Yeah, I'm going to take the flip side of that concern and say, as Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, every day at 10 o'clock, I was handed the president's daily intelligence brief, and I would dutifully go through it physically there and then hand it right back to the officer who had brought it to me. And if you let anyone skate through those procedures, you weaken all of us, because the incentives to protect those documents so closely continue because of consequences that individuals see. And it does not matter who you are, where you are in that chain of command. Hey, last thought here. Tom's excellent reporting mentions sources. Boy, does that make my hair on the back of my neck, which is the only place I have hair anymore, stand up. And the point is, think about how that is received in Paris, in Berlin, in Tokyo, in Canberra. Do you think those nations are going to want to share information with us anymore? Do you think they're going to want to tell us what is happening in their domestic political domain with the Russian intrusion? Probably not, if they think that intelligence is going to be scattered into the winds. Big mistake for the United States.
The way we protect documents and secrets and security protects our reputation in a real way. Not just respect, people trusting the United States. Former NATO Supreme Allied Commander James Stavridis, thank you very much. And NBC's Tom Winter, thank you as well for your reporting. Mike Lindell says that FBI agents seized his cell phone and questioned him yesterday outside a fast food restaurant in Minnesota.
They want to find out if he really did date.
No.
He did not.
No.
It's a slander.
I know he didn't. That is slander, but still, there's some FBI agents who want to know. They're going to check the text.
The fast food restaurant was a Hardee's, and Lindell told the New York Times the agents served him with a search and seizure warrant and interviewed him for about 15 minutes. The FBI has confirmed that he was served with a warrant. He claims agents asked him about Tina Peters, a Colorado County clerk who's been indicted on charges of tampering with voting machines after the 2020 election.
Trumpers, you can't do that, by the way.
Lindell is a prominent supporter of former President Trump and the big lie. He's a regular at Trump's rallies and around the country, and a frequent guest on far right-wing platforms. So let's stay with what we know here, Claire. If they have a warrant, if the FBI is able to execute a search and seizure and take his phone, what do they have to be able to do that?
They have probable cause that there's evidence of a crime on that phone. It's just that simple. And that's what people need to get over, this whole terminology about raids and breaking in places. I mean, keep in mind that every judge who approves these search warrants, they look at what is being asserted by the FBI. They look at the facts. And they have to make an independent determination that there is probable cause, that evidence of a crime is present, and that it needs to be secured. And so none of this is outside the law. This is the essence of the rule of law. And I am so tired of these Republicans whining about how somehow this is not the law. It's the law. And Mike Lindell got a little piece of law yesterday. It's called the rule of law. And it will be very interesting to see what they find on that phone.
Yeah, no, it'll be fascinating. And Mike Barnicle, I mean, you've covered news, you've covered crime, you've covered these sort of investigations for a very long time. And when we start seeing the president's aides, some of the president's closest followers, people who worked for him, having their phones taken. Again, you can't do that unless you have probable cause that a crime's been committed. And it just seems that everything that Donald Trump has done over the past 5 years, specifically over the past 2.5 years. Finally, as we would say in North Georgia, the chickens are coming home to roost. It appears that everything's catching up with this guy all at once.
You know, Joe, my sense after talking to several people about this over the past couple of weeks is that despite the coverage of this ongoing story surrounding everything having to do with Donald Trump and the missing classified files at Mar-a-Lago and everything else surrounding that, that we, despite the massive coverage that we've given it, excellent coverage, that both print and electronic, we are still underestimating the toughness, the rigor, and the discipline of Merrick Garland in pursuit of this case. He's a very cautious individual. He moves slowly, I'm told. He's a very thoughtful individual. He's not going to sign off on anything that is going to be getting out ahead of their skis in terms of the Justice Department. This is a huge, huge ongoing story, and clearly at this point, it appears that it is potentially lethal to Donald Trump in a legal sense.
And Joe and Mika, first of all, easy pickings for FBI agents, as it's well known that My Pillow guy fancies Tuesday night dinners in Minneapolis area Hardee's. But more seriously, what they're looking for there is that he was in the Oval Office repeatedly in the weeks after the election. Let's remember, this was after a COVID outbreak on election night. This was after some of Trump's senior staff had either quit or left or started looking for other jobs or working from home. The guardrails, the gatekeepers were gone, and the Sidney Powells and the Rudy Giulianis, the Michael Flynn's, and yes, the Mike Lindells of the world, they're the ones who were in the Oval Office talking to Trump and floating conspiracy theories about how the election was rigged, but also what they could do about it. The idea of calling martial law, the idea of seizing voting machines, and certainly the idea of obstructing the peaceful transfer of power. And that's where this investigation is. And to Mike's excellent point, FBI, the agents and the Department of Justice, not just pursuing what happened there with Mar-a-Lago, but of course the January 6th investigation continues. And many people believe that that still actually is where the most legal peril rests for the former president. And we saw more than 40 Trump associates were served with subpoenas. A few had their phones taken. This investigation is only going wider by the day.
Start with a top Republican lawmaker introducing new legislation yesterday to ban abortion nationwide. 3 months after the Supreme Court ruled that abortion laws should be decided at the state level, Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina unveils his new plan to ban the procedure across the country after 15 weeks. Though Graham's bill would allow exceptions for cases of rape or incest or when the life of the mother is at risk, it would roll back access in some Democratic-led states, which have stronger laws protecting abortion access. This, while keeping in place laws in other states where abortions are even more restricted than Graham is proposing. Speaking about the proposal yesterday, Graham said he introduced the bill to make it clear that this is where the Republican Party stands on the issue.
If we take back the House and the Senate, I can assure you we'll have a vote on our bill. If the Democrats are in charge, I don't know if we'll ever have a vote after they introduce the bill to define who they are. I thought it'd be nice to introduce a bill to find who we are. If you vote with the Democrats, we'll look more like Syria and North Korea and Iran.
Yeah, North Korea and Iran, huh? Okay. That's interesting. Willie, first of all, a couple things. This 15-week ban, if it were like, it sounds a lot like Mississippi, the Mississippi law that Chief Justice Roberts wanted the court to move to instead of a complete overthrow of Roe. But this 15-week ban with exceptions for rape and incest and life of mother, that's where most Americans are if you look at polling. Yeah. That fits mostly if there is a middle ground in the abortion debate, this is where the middle ground is. It's where most European countries are. Only problem, though, is Republicans have been saying since 1973, this is not a national issue. This is an issue we want to devolve back to the states. Take the power away from the Supreme Court, let the states decide it, and then democracy will reign. Lindsey Graham completely got in the way of that message yesterday with this, and there are a lot of Republicans who aren't really happy about it.
He did, and you're right on the polling. That's not your opinion or mine. If you look at national polling, abortion after the first trimester, support falls off a cliff and continues to go down from there. But to your point, it's a little late for this. This is Lindsey Graham watching what's happening in some of these primary races, what the polling looks like ahead of the midterms, where suburban women are going, where independents are going, voting on the issue of abortion, and trying too late to slam on the brakes and say, no, actually, this is what we meant. This is what we meant. We're more moderate than we appear to be, but it's simply not true. And you saw the frustration with Republicans yesterday pushing back against Lindsey Graham's idea of a federal abortion ban. Here's what they said.
With regard to his bill, you'll have to ask him about it. In terms of scheduling, I think most of the members of my conference prefer that this be dealt with at the state level.
I think the far better approach is the legislation that Tim Kaine, Lisa Murkowski, Kirsten Sinema, and I have introduced, which would codify a number of cases and sets viability as the point after which states can impose their own regulations.
I support the fact that you've got we the people can decide this in 50 states. Okay?
Decisions concerning the hotly contested question of abortion go to elected legislatures. That's going to be principally decided at the state levels.
I think that we need to be codifying Roe and not turning it back the clock 50 years.
So Claire McCaskill, this is a mess entirely of Republicans' own making. They got Roe overturned, trigger laws in many states. A lot of politicians, including many running in important races for the United States Senate, are saying during their primaries, we want no exceptions for rape. We want no exceptions for incest. And now Lindsey Graham trying desperately with a Hail Mary here to put a new marker down for Republicans.
Yeah, the White House sent Lindsey Graham flowers last night. They were thrilled that he switched the conversation back